It's 5 o'clock, and I'm calling the meeting together for this evening being April 28th. And at this time, I'm calling to order and announcing that Cale Bushman will be the Secretary Pro Tem for this portion of the meeting. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Cale.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher. Cassie, as Deputy Clerk, would you please read the Leadership Choices Report?
Certainly. For the role of President, Jim Boucher. For the role of Vice President, Lance Trollope. For the role of Treasurer, Sarah Brock. And we had no one declare themselves as a candidate for the role of Clerk.
Jim Boucher has declared himself a candidate for the office of President. Are there any nominations from the floor? Hearing no additional nominations, I seek a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations for the office of President are closed. At this time, then I will ask board members to cast their ballots for the office of President and pass their ballots to Cassie. The tabulated votes indicate the board president will be Jim Boucher. Congratulations, President Boucher.
Thank you very much.
Lance Trollope has declared himself as candidate for the office of Vice President. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Hearing no additional nominations, I seek a motion to close nominations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations for the office of President are closed. At this time, then, board members, please cast your ballots for the office of Vice President and pass them to Cassie.
I heard an extension there.
Yeah, I'm sure I want to contribute to this.
I think I just heard Pat nominate himself.
No.
The tabulate votes indicate the board vice president will be Lance Trollope. Congratulations, Vice President Trollope. John Kreischer and Sarah Brock have declared themselves as a candidate for the office of Treasurer. Are there any nominations from the floor? Hearing no additional nominations, I seek a motion to close nominations.
Gail, sorry, I'm
Go
going to
ahead.
remove my name from the treasurer list, so.
Thank you. Any additional nominations? Hearing no additional nominations, I seek a motion to close nominations.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations for the office of Treasurer are closed. At this time, then, board members, please cast your ballots for the office of Treasurer and pass them to Cassie.
Fund balance did drop more under your term.
Sarah can fix it.
It's all because of that one report you read.
Yeah. That just hit me, John.
The tabulated votes indicate the board treasurer will be Sarah Brock. Congratulations, Treasurer Brock. No one has declared themselves as a candidate for the office of clerk. Are there any nominations from the floor?
I don't care. I'll do it.
Are you nominating yourself or somebody else?
Way to go,
No,
Corey.
myself. Jim.
I'll nominate Corey.
I'll second it.
Hearing no additional nominations, I seek a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations for the office of clerk are closed. Board members, please cast your ballots for the office of clerk and pass them to Cassie.
Thank you.
In case we have several rounds.
The tabulated votes indicate the board clerk will be Corey Sillers. Congratulations, Clerk Sillers, and thank you. The board needs to appoint the board secretary and deputy clerk. I seek a motion to appoint Cassie Peck as board secretary and deputy clerk.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Congratulations to our board officers. I'll turn the meeting over to our current board president, President Boucher.
Did so well, I almost want to keep on having you do this and continue to do this, but I will take over. Congratulations to our board officers. I will turn the meeting over, as he has done, to me, and here we go. I'm looking at appointing positions, and the positions to be appointed are Audit of Bills Committee. We need 4 people to do that. And usually the lead person would be our treasurer, so Sarah, you would be taking care of that. And I need 3 more for the audit.
I can serve.
I can as well.
And Jennifer, and then also I'd like to put Nick on this committee as well. Bring you aboard and become more aware of the budget, be a great opportunity for you.
That's good.
All right, I would like to nominate, and we'll find out who I would like to nominate in a second, as a delegate for the 2026 Delegate Assembly, January 21st through the 23rd of 2026. I'm looking at Jane, who would like to be that delegate, and I'm nominating Jane for that position.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I would like to nominate, as we move forward here, I need a secondary as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Cassie? I need a secondary person for the position. Anyone who would like to be nominated? I'm going to be looking at it. I can appoint, but I'd like to find out if anybody would like to be the alternative or the alternate for Jane. Any volunteers? Going once, going twice, 3 times, 4 times? Nick, would you like to be the delegate alternative or alternate to take this position on and work with Jane?
Sure.
Pertaining to that, okay. Let me see. So this would be all in favor of,
So was that your nomination?
that would be my nomination, correct?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. That's the alternate. And then we have one more that we have to have elected, correct, Cassie? What's that, yeah?
For that, it's done. Now you can move on to the Wausau School Foundation Board.
Okay.
State that again.
Sarah, so I'm going to nominate Sarah for this position as we move forward. I don't need a vote or a motion on these. So Sarah will take care of the Wausau School Foundation.
Stay on?
Okay, for CISA. Corey, are you interested in that position again? I'd like to nominate Corey to serve as the board member representative to the CISA 9 Annual Convention. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Board Legislative Liaison. Corey, you've done that this past year. Would you like to continue to do that?
I can.
Right. I will appoint Corey to that position. Looking at the Weekend Consortium Committee member. Sarah, you did that last time. Would you like to continue?
I haven't, but I will.
Sarah? John, you would put your interest
No,
on that.
take that.
Yeah, I can.
John can take
So you
that.
can take that, John? Okay. So for Weekend Consortium Committee member, John, you'll take that. Thank you. Union Contract Negotiating Committee, this is 2, don't we?
3.
3? Oh, 3. So I have Sarah and John interested in that position, and then Pat. And Pat would be on that position. Gifted and talented committee member. John, are you still interested in that position?
Somebody else can probably, you need one for that?
Sarah, you're heavy into curriculum and that. Would you be interested in that position?
Sure, unless somebody else wants it.
The ball could be passed. If not, Sarah, would you take that? Okay, thank you. Liaison to the Marathon County Extension, Education, and Economic Development Committee. Any interest in that position? Who did we have in that position last year?
That's me, but I
Would
think
you
I'm
like-
full.
You're pretty full.
Full.
Yeah. You took on a load last year. You're still taking on a load.
Different load.
Right. Anyone interested in that position?
Which one was it?
That is the liaison to the Marathon County Extension, Education, and Economic Development Committee. You do that?
Mhm.
So be it then. Thank you. Appreciate that. I believe we have covered everybody in all the positions. Cassie? All right. I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
Everybody's following along here.
You're out of order.
Get all kinds of vice presidents tonight.
There you go. All right, well, let me see, where are we at here?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda
There you go.
as
I'll second the
presented.
motion to approve the consent.
Thank you. Appreciate the help on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now I'm going to seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, I am calling to order the Monday, April 28th, 2025 Education Operations Committee meeting to order. I'm seeking a motion to approve the minutes of March 17th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 3, we had a presentation today, but we're going to postpone that till May 12th. We will have 2 presentations from the elementary, and from the other position was, what else?
Sorry.
Montessori, May 12th. With that, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 4. There is nobody for public comment, so we will move on to agenda item number 5. Mr. Bagut will present an updated UHT plan based on elementary attendance zone changes. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Which attachment would you like first?
Oh, we're, not yet. This isn't us. Sorry. Sorry. You can sit here if you want.
You may have some good input, and you can grab the mic.
So I'd like to thank Lieutenant Van Offeren from the Sheriff's Department for being here tonight. He helped us with this process. If you have any questions, he's available, and so is Melody Sadke from my office. Just the packet, if you could pull that up. Go to that one. Yep, perfect. So the first couple things she clicked through were the letter from the County Sheriff's Office, the crossing guard changes, the secondary plan for hazardous transportation, and the elementary plan. So in general, what we're here to do is DPI requires us to provide transportation options for students who live outside of 2 miles of walking distance from the school they attend. Unless, and so students inside that zone, that 2 mile area, that's parental responsibility, unless the students reside in an unusually hazardous transportation or UHTs. So that's what we're here to update tonight. The secondary plan, could you just click over to that for a second? There have been no changes to that plan. It just was enveloped in the elementary plan, so we're separating them. So that's all that is. For the elementary plan, we are consolidating multiple schools this year. So we will have students going to different schools than they went to this year and necessitated the review of our UHT zones. So what our process was we reviewed our new attendance zones along with our current plan, the current UHT plan, met with law enforcement and worked together with them. They went out and reviewed all the locations and all the sites in question, provided recommendations. The letter that was at the front of the packet, they provided that. So that was our process. And what we're asking tonight is for you to approve these new zones. So that very first page, those are all our unusually hazardous transportation zones within the district. The only ones that are changing are the schools that would be consolidated. So we're not touching, for example, Statine, South Mountain, Rib Mountain, those types of schools. So if you could go through past Statine, past Rib Mountain, past South Mountain to Thomas Jefferson. Thank you. So the one thing I wanted to highlight before we dive into this is that no students are no longer in a UHT zone as a result of consolidation. So no spaces were eliminated. For Thomas Jefferson, the only thing that was added was on that right zone. So what you're looking at highlighted in kind of a salmon-ish color is the unusually hazardous transportation zones for Jefferson. So at the top of that zone, just I think one additional block was added on the right side. We are adding a crossing guard on Strobridge and Merrill. There will still be crossing guards at Bridge and 6th, so that is for the grant students who are now walking. There was a crossing guard there. There will still be a crossing guard there to get them across Bridge. There will still be a crossing guard on Randolph and Merrill, or Business 51, and then Randolph and 3rd. If you want to go down to the next page. There you go. So that's where the hazardous transportation zone changed. It just went north by a block. Any questions on Thomas Jefferson? Okay, we can move on to G.D. Jones. So for G.D. Jones, the only change that was made is in the, again, salmon-colored block on the left towards the bottom down by the river there. Initially, that did not go all the way down to the river, but those students were getting busing anyways. Otherwise, they would have had to walk across 17th where there is no crossing guard and it's 4 lanes of traffic. So we're just making that official. But again, those students were already getting transportation. So students from Lincoln will be walking to G.D. Jones, and all the crossing guards that were there will remain. I don't think we added any. We did add a crossing guard at Sherman and South 12th, so there's a crossing guard added there. Any questions on Jones? For Riverview, there's no extension of the UHT. All the students attending from Hewitt were outside the 2-mile area, so no changes. So for Franklin, we will have changes. If you can go down, perfect. Thank you. On the left bottom zone, that did extend upward. Is that correct?
That's the same.
It's the same. Okay. So that one remains the same. And then we added a crossing guard at Franklin and North 7th for that. But those students from Hawthorne will be asked to walk to Franklin. I'd like to point out that the distances students will be walking are similar to the distance that students are already walking to those schools. So it's not as if we're asking students to walk a great deal further than students are already walking within this district. So I think for Franklin, that is it. And then for John Marshall, if you go down to that one. So that's a big new addition. So everything to the east of Grand Avenue will be a hazardous transportation zone, so they will be getting district busing in that zone. We could not ask the students to cross Grand Avenue. And then the one other small addition was on the left side there, just bringing it up to Forest, but that was part of the Hawthorne Hazardous Transportation Zone before. So those are the changes I have. The motion we would ask is for you to accept the elementary and secondary UHT plans, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, let's put the motion on the table first of all. I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the UHT zone changes as presented.
So moved. Second.
Questions? None?
The only question I'll have is, last summer, we kind of had a tiny discussion about how city buses might be able to fill in. Are we expecting First Student to be able to handle any of the new zones, or are we gonna try to have the city do those?
No, we don't ask our elementary students to ride on the city bus.
Well, they'd be
First-
special buses, obviously dedicated, but,
First Student is confident they can.
okay.
What they've told us, what they've relayed to us, is that they're confident they can handle the increased routing.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
thank you.
Agenda item number 6, debt defeasance approval. Mr. Bagut and the PMA team will present the 2024-25 debt defeasance strategy for adoption by the board. Official defeasance adoption language to be provided by Quarles and Brady prior to 5/12 meeting.
Fantastic, thank you. So joining us virtually are Eric Cass and Charlie Fairbos. Is that how you say your last name, Charlie?
Got it.
All right, from the PMA team, and they will be walking us through the debt defeasance. I got this question on Friday, and I'd like to point out that this will be the debt defeasance for the 24-25 fiscal year. So nothing to do with the budget necessarily going forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Charlie and Eric.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here today to talk about the debt defeasance that's going to the board for approval on May 12th. Josh, did you have the slide? It looks like you have the slides up already, so I don't have to share them or anything.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So yeah, just looking at the first slide here, the district has been fortunate enough, looks like 6 out of the last 7 years, to be able to essentially get an additional levy. So that's levying dollars in excess of what's needed for the Fund 39 debt repayment, while still keeping your tax levy level, and then you're able to essentially apply that additional levy towards repaying existing debt early to save the taxpayers, interest cost over the long term. So over the last several years here, as you see on the first slide, the district has done a few different things. Debt defeasance 2017 through 2021, as you see the first 4 items on that slide, and that's what we're discussing tonight as well. So the district has been, applying levy in excess of what's needed for debt repayment to pay off a variety of Fund 39 issues that have been outstanding, as well as some prepayments and an accelerated new debt payment that I'll touch on in a little bit. So what we're trying to establish here in general is that what we're doing this year with the debt defeasance is essentially staying in sequence with what the district has done for the past several years here. So the next slide is the district's existing Fund 39, so referendum approved debt that's currently outstanding. So you have 2 smaller issues from 2015 and 2016, and then that much larger $99 million issue from 2022. So we'll see that those 2 smaller issues the first one is getting paid off here by the end of 2028. And then the second one also has maturities principal maturities being paid off sooner than the larger issue. So what we're really going to be focusing on this year with the defeasance is tackling those farthest out maturities of the $99 million issue to try to maximize the amount of interest that the district will save the taxpayers by paying those maturities off earliest. And just a a quick slide before we get into the defeasance analysis for this year, touching on just the difference between a debt prepayment and a defeasance. So last year, the district performed a prepayment, which is essentially just paying off early debt that's already callable. So each of your issues had a call date set, usually between 7 and 10 years from the initial issue date. And if you're already out to that 7 to 10 year mark, you're just able to essentially pay it back. Very little work in terms of what the district needs to do and work in the background, and a little bit lower of cost. But this year, we found it in talking to the district more advantageous to pursue a debt defeasance, which is essentially placing funds in escrow to be paid off by the escrow agent at the call date. So the $99 million issue doesn't have its debt callable yet. You'll be coming into the callable debt in 2030. So what you're doing this year is applying those additional levy dollars to a defeasance, which will place those dollars in an escrow, and then essentially the escrow agent will pay that off on the call date. And the key part about that is we're in an interest rate environment where you're able to lock those funds into an investment that essentially matches the interest that you have to pay from now until the call date, which is why this works quite well for the district. And the other thing there is that even though the funds technically aren't being paid off until the call date, from what the district has to account for and consider is that as soon as they send out the wire for the defeasance this fiscal year, that's off your books. So that's considered spent for aid purposes and debt repayment purposes. Now the next slide, so our recommendation for, as Josh said, the fiscal year 24-25 school year, so this fiscal year, is to essentially apply the whole additional levy from this year, which was $15.4 million, to the longest maturities. So those maturities would be of the $99 million issue. So those maturities would be the 2042, 2041, and then grabbing part of the 2040 maturity. And as we'll see in the far right-hand column, that allows us to both prepay the principal for those maturities and save the district a little over $630,000 every year in interest costs that you would have had to carry and pay every single year up until those dates. So essentially by paying off the $14.4 million through defeasance this year, the net interest savings to the district is a little over $10 million. And then with that being said, since the district is positively tertiary aided, which means the more you spend, the more dollars the state gives you back in aid, that's also going to help you get a one-time aid increase for next fiscal year based on your spending this fiscal year. And the last slide here we have is just the updated version of slide 2, but with the defeasance in there. So you can see that this year's defeasance really had an increased savings because we were able to go out and target those long maturities by applying that $15.5 million and getting about $10 million in total interest savings for the district. Yeah, and then I went through this all pretty quick, but we're open to taking any questions you might have.
Questions from the board? Jim, I don't know, maybe not for tonight, but somehow this is a big part of the message that we need to bring forward again for a referendum. And I know it was done a bit in this previous one. This is a really strong story. Like, this is an exceptionally strong story for a district to be able to tell. And I think if we can more clearly quantify, I mean, think about that, $10 million in savings, in interest, with this defeasance, on top of the other, I don't even know how many it's been, 25 million that we've saved over the years. If we could turn that into tangible, here's what would have happened to the mill rate, here's what would have happened to our levy if we didn't do this, and help the taxpayers understand that, yes, we can do future referendums and not increase taxes because of some of these actions. It's not the only one, but it's one of them. And that's where I think we really have to hit the point home, because as we know, there's some people around who just don't believe or refuse to believe that we won't have to raise taxes. I just think we got to take another bite at the apple and tell that story.
I think that's a key point as you put it out there, Pat. In fact, that was what a lot of people questioned. How can you be asking for a referendum and not raising taxes? Well, it's because we have taken the debt down so much throughout the period of time that we're able to come back and ask for this without raising taxes.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it also connects to the question of what have you done with past referendum, and we can show that not only did we do what we promised, which is pay everything on time and keep the taxes flat, we actually paid ahead of time.
Right.
And kept the taxes flat. So I agree with Pat, it all ties together, fiscal responsibility and showing that we've done what we said in the past, and I think we just have to get that message out there.
And this is something that's been done for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not something that's just happened in the last year or so, but Wausau School District, the board has looked at this throughout the years, as the two of you know, and that has benefited us. And that's one of the big comments we need to get out for the next referendum. There's no doubt about it.
And one other comment, not a question, but a comment to just, I know everybody here knows, but just in case anybody's watching, the decision on how to spend this money that we've levied, we don't have the option to use it on our general operating budget. So if anybody's wondering why we're not using this to address a later topic tonight, we can't. So this has to be used for our debt.
Josh, any other comments that you want to add?
No, thank you so much. And
Questions that and comments that have been made?
yeah, no, just thank you, and thanks to the PMA team for being here.
With that, I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the debt defeasance strategy as accepted for presentation and final adoption at the May 12th board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item 7, Mr. Magut and Mr. Priest from M3 will present proposed plan, premium, and third-party administrator changes for adoption by the board.
So we are, the last couple of years, our health insurance has run over significantly, and we've made incremental changes in that time. We're looking at more significant changes now, and John Preuss from M3 is here to talk us through that. So we'll just start with the presentation.
Thanks, Josh. I have one comment, which is when we say significant changes, what we're not trying to change is the employees' deductibles coinsurance. So by the changes that we're making, we're trying to keep their plan design to the extent possible, not to cause them to have an increase in cost as it relates to out-of-pocket, deductible, coinsurance, and copayments. So what we're looking at is, since the renewal was driven by utilization, stop-loss increases, high-cost claimants, we've made changes and would have had a higher increase had we not increased deductible, coinsurance, and copayments in the last 2 years. And in preparation for the increase that we saw coming, we did take it out to bid early this year. We went to 7 third-party administrators. We also went to 19 different stop-loss carriers. UMR was the most competitive, which is $556,000 lower than the Aspirus Health Plan renewal. UMR including additional services that will help contain medical costs while maintaining access to the local providers, including both Marshfield Clinic and Aspirus. So the biggest positive change, in my opinion, for employees is that by making this change to UMR, you not only get a national network, but you also get the ability to not have employees choose what we call a narrow network or a network featuring just one provider entity over another. So we get to go from two plans from three plans to just two plans. So plans will just be the traditional plan and the high deductible health plan, instead of the traditional plan, the high deductible health plan, and the signature network or narrow network plan. It's just, so if I'm an employee, what does that mean to me? It means I can choose today to go to Marshfield Clinic, I can choose tomorrow to go to Aspirus, and there's no impact on me financially. That is not true today. I think that's a positive result of the change in addition to the savings. We just have a couple more slides before we get to the end. We didn't prepare a long presentation. We know everyone would appreciate that. But a couple of advantages that we want you to be aware of. The first thing is I mentioned the lower administrative fees. The additional services, I think, are significant because we're trying to make a change that ends up sort of bending the trend. We want to try and impact the cost so that we don't have to, in the future, ask for as many deductible coinsurance and copayment changes. Some of those include complex condition care management, utilization management, ongoing condition care management. They're including teledoc, which means instead of purchasing or paying for HealthJoy, you'd be able to cancel that. That saves another $80,000, which we didn't factor into this, but it's very positive. The national network I mentioned, the reporting advantages with UMR, I believe that the reports will help us because it gives us greater access to the information to determine the savings as a result of hiring UMR. Local presence is important. As one of the largest third-party administrators in the United States, I think it's great that they happen to be here in Wausau. The majority of their client base isn't even in Wisconsin. I mean, they have a lot of clients out east and out west, but here they are in our backyard, so I think that's a positive. In terms of plan design flexibility, the ability to structure plans the same way that they are now, I think is also very positive. Again, we're not trying to change the plan. We're trying to manage the cost this time around with a change in third-party administrators. The next slide is really the recommendation, which is to, effective July 1st, change to UMR as the new third-party administrator and increase funding rates by 7% with no changes in the plan design itself. But are there any questions?
Can I? Thank you. So I did want to make sure that we're clear that this would be a 7% increase in employee premiums. So much less than if we went with the renewal that we were facing. And we're hoping through additional savings in the fees and things like that to save somewhere around 11% with the change. But that 7% is being passed on. The district bears the brunt of that, but the employee does bear some of that. So we want it to be completely upfront and transparent about that.
So that is what the staff is picking up, correct? 7%?
So the premium as a total increases by 7%. So whatever the staff portion is, that will increase by 7%.
Okay.
Whatever the district portion is, that will increase by 7%.
Okay.
Is that just a branch locally, or their actual corporate taxable base is Wausau?
It's taxable base is Wausau.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
It really is. It stems from them being Wausau benefits previously and having sold to Grand Health.
I think it should be noted that we have two board members that left because of conflict of interest, one being with UMR and the other being a staff member. So when people watch our board members, do be aware of the fact that we're very conscious of conflicts of interest so that that doesn't play a part on anything. So, thank you.
So at this point is where we would ask for a motion.
Okay. I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval to accept the plan, premium, and third-party administrator changes as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, follow-up questions? Not? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I did want to note that information will start going out to staff. Education will start going out to staff now that we have the change. So, the second thing we're here to talk to you about is direct primary care. Direct primary care is, I'll let John talk more about it, but this is something that we brought to the board 6-8 months ago, maybe more. It's an opportunity for us to potentially provide better access to staff while saving staff and the district money. So that's the goal of what we're talking about tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to John.
So years ago, we've always heard about on-site clinics and near-site clinics. The new lingo for that is direct primary care, but it's very similar. A near-site clinic means you're setting up a clinic that your employees can go to near your location where people are employed. The challenge with the school district is, like, there's how many different schools. So we've already looked, and we'd be looking at a near-site clinic that has access for both the east and west side of town. And the last two that we have been narrowed down to would do that. But just to remind everyone, what is exactly direct primary care? Because you're going to hear this term thrown around in the months ahead as this continues to be evaluated, like by the insurance committee. You're going to hear people say, well, I like this DPC, but not that DPC. Direct primary care is a privately held group of clinicians that contract directly with you within a geographic area. Their stated goals are usually to improve access for your employees and drive down cost. I'm just going to show you briefly how that happens.
Is that the one you want?
Yeah, that one's perfect. So this is an example of a patient's annual visits. So they went in, they had 2 or 3 visits for that year. They also had an ER visit, they had an urgent care visit, they had a skin tag removal, a joint injection, and a nebulizer treatment. As you can see, traditionally, the way this works, and the way it works with your health plan now, is they're charged for each one of those services. How it would work with direct primary care is you would pay, in this example, $29 per member per month. For this individual, that's $348 a year. They get to do 2 or 3 visits, urgent care, skin tag removal, joint injection, and nebulizer treatment, and it's still the fixed amount of $29 per employee per month. So if that employee went in 15 times or 2, it's still $29 per employee per month. So that subscription saved this individual, really saved the district, since the district is paying for most of it as a self-funded plan. It saved both the employee and the district combined $4,287. So it's just a kind of an example of how does this work? How does it provide savings? Are there any questions about that?
Will the direct primary care, do they provide any infusion services?
I'd have to look. I do think that they do in some instances, but not. The more complex it gets, the lesser the odds.
I'm not talking like dialysis or anything like
Right.
that, but just, if you go in, sometimes if the kid has a flu or whatever it is,
Yes.
sometimes they just want to give.
For sure, they do vaccines, for
Okay.
example.
Okay. And this topic, I know, is sometimes challenging to understand because it doesn't make sense when you look at it on paper, right? How can one be 348 and one be 4635? Just think of it they want to incentivize value and health over volume. That's really the biggest difference, right? So every specialty on the right-hand side is going to get their bite at the apple. That doesn't happen on the left-hand side. So it's really about keeping people healthy, offering them the right care at the right place when they need it, and not having to leverage or use all those other services on the right, which really drives it up.
Exactly right. I mean, we think it makes sense to pursue it. The next slide looks at the results of the RFP a little bit. We went to actually 6 of them. We listed 4 here that we had it narrowed down to before: Aspirus, Anovia, Astia, and Link. Now it's been narrowed down to 2. The insurance committee interviews were conducted for these 2 finalists recently, and we're gathering feedback from them on what they think of those 2. our rationale for recommending as your broker, like, why do this? We think it helps, number one, give employees better access to health care. Two, the savings. As one board member mentioned, I think that it makes sense to try and manage costs when you're self-funded, and this gives us an opportunity to do that a little bit better. Employee education is obviously going to be a key component. The other local employers include Green Hack, Colby and Colby, Crystal Finishing, and Stevens Point Area Public School District. But I can tell you everyone is starting to move in this direction. They're starting to say, we pay millions of dollars for health care. Why not put some of that money into our own contracted facility?
And just to reiterate that the education part, if those that are covered by the plan, if the behavior doesn't change, this is nothing but an expense to the district. People's behavior has to change, and they have to use this service in order for those savings to be realized.
Very good point. We are getting some great results with the other employers that I mentioned in terms of utilization, but it always starts out a little bit slow.
I want to add that feedback came through loud and clear from the insurance committee, that by far the most important thing is employee education and employee adoption. So they need to know why this is beneficial for them. I agree.
So in terms of next steps, the next steps are to, I think, survey the staff, right, Josh?
Yeah.
And get feedback about it. And then after obtaining that feedback, narrow down to one of the two remaining DPCs. And the process actually did start almost a year ago. So it's like after a year, it would be great to be able to come to the board and recommend one of them soon.
Any questions?
So you said that's something they actually have to opt into, that subscription service as you find it?
All employees would be enrolled, so it would probably be more like an opt-out. Every employee would have access to it.
Okay.
And it's for the employee and any dependents.
Yes, employee and family members.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, John. Josh, you're a busy guy today,
I am.
and so you're going to continue on with Luann and Mark, who present on the possibility of funding middle school athletics through Fund 80. Now you can pull yourself to the table and use the microphone.
The key to being busy is to actually bring the people who know what they're talking about.
There you go. Good point.
So Luann and Mark are here. We want to talk through the potential of moving middle school athletics to Fund 80. Mark and I had this conversation probably a year ago. He actually brought the suggestion up to me. A number of our neighboring districts are doing this. Wisconsin Rapids does it. Marshfield, this is their first year doing it. So what this is Fund 80 is our community fund, and it would allow middle school athletics to be funded out of Fund 80. So we'll talk a little bit more through that. Is there anything you guys want to add off the top? Okay. So we have amazing offerings and participation at our middle school, both of our middle schools. And you can see a short list of the offerings up there, the number of participants, and the total budget. So we budget between salaries and other things. We budget just north of $300,000 total for middle school athletics. It's not related to this conversation, but at some point we do have to look at the funding for our athletics. We significantly underfund compared to our neighboring districts. So yeah, it's an important conversation to have. Anything you guys want to talk about with anything about funding or the participation?
Well, everything is continuing, obviously, to rise, as we all know that. And, we're just trying to keep our students active after school, keep them on, in front of adults and in good leadership. And, we'd like to continue. We do have a good offering, but we also have, I know I'm on the John Muir's side, we have large numbers. So to continue to have the correct amount of adults in leadership roles for them, which is tough. And that's kind of what has started to bring about some of these talks, like how can we fund some of this and how can we gain, the correct numbers, which really keeps our kids focused and in the right direction, keeps them from just going home and, making choices where maybe they're on their own. I think we're just in need of really looking at how we fund our programs to keep us so we can get those games, we can get our transportation and keep them all looking as a team.
It'll help to keep us from having to do fundraising to support what we need to do. I'm more on the east side, and I've done fundraisings for the last few years to pick up what still is needed to do everything that we want to do with the teams. And we did have the opportunity to start some new sports this spring, which is great because the kids love it, and it's an opportunity for them to play baseball. Baseball, for example, we started at both sides, and softball for Luann. But bringing on those new coaches and those new buses and those new officials creates more expense. And this is a way to help us take care of all that and give the kids the opportunities they have that our neighboring schools already have. So that's a big part of it is the conference we're in for the middle school is really supportive of education and athletics, and this gives us an opportunity to continue what we're doing and kind of be on level with the other schools.
So why does this have to come in front of the board? If you're just funding it out of Fund 80 instead of Fund 10. Fund 80 is the community service fund. So what that means is they have to be programs that are viable and available to all students who live within your district. So this would mean that our middle school sports would be open to private school and homeschooled students who live within our district. As I said, it's very common in neighboring districts. And what do we use Fund 80 for? School resource officers, our incredible school resource officers are funded out of there. Our G2M program, our after-school program, and then middle school athletics and some other small things are in there. But that's why it has to come in front of the board. So we would be looking for you to adopt the recommended change to funding out of Fund 80 with the understanding that that would open our middle school sports to students who don't attend our school. And the reason that that is possible is that they're non-WIAA sports, so that is an option for us.
Questions from the board? I'll just make a comment. Having been in athletics for most of my educational career, this is very important to have a strong athletic program at the middle school level, as well as a fine arts program at the middle school. Being a believer in AAA, academics, arts, and athletics, we can't miss out on this. And if students are getting these types of opportunities at districts around us and we're not offering that, we're taking something away from our students. I get a little concerned about the fact that when referenda do not go through, people get, okay, what are you going to be cutting? Cut athletics, cut fine arts. Well, that's probably one of the worst places to go because, first of all, it's not a big part of our budget. It's probably around 4% or maybe less. Having been in a very large district, I know that that was always a comment, and the comment always came back that less than 4%, we're going to cut that when it's so important. We need to do things so that our students do not lose out. We need to make sure that they are getting the benefits. And I appreciate the fact that the community is coming together to do this so that we can offer this to our students. It's very important. It's very important, so thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I think just on a related note, our middle school arts programs probably compare with or exceed everyone around. And I can't say the same thing with our middle school athletics support. And that's not a negative to anybody that's taking part in it now. We just don't fund it like other districts fund their middle school athletics.
No, we don't. And it's been that way for a little bit here, a while. And I appreciate the fact that you're coming forth and helping us do more for our students at the middle school level. Big part. With that, I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board and the approval to fund middle school athletics through the use of Fund 80.
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions?
I did have one question.
Go ahead.
Is that taking away from those other school resource officer, the other items in that Fund 80? Are they going to have now limited resources because this is getting paid out?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. So Fund 80 is a direct community support fund, so that will increase the overall fund for Fund 80.
Thank you.
Yep, great question.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. At this point in time, the Agenda 10, the board will review the proposed changes to the attached Neola policies. Mr. Bushman, you're going to walk us through that, and we will move to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, President Boucher. Just as a point, the board members have seen these policies and have been able to examine them. So as we go through them, there's been thought that's gone into it through each one. What I'll do is read the specific policy. If there's a concern or point for communication, we'll just pull out and talk with it at that time. If there's not a need for discussion, we'll just move on to the next one. So the first policy that we have is 0152, officers. 0164, meetings. 1100, district organization. 1130, ethics and conflict of interest. 1241, non-reemployment of the district administrator. 2210, curriculum development. 2270, religion in the curriculum. 2271, early college credit program. 2271.01, start college now program. 2416, student privacy and parental access to information. 2440, summer or interim session school. 2440.01, summer or interim school attendance. 2460, program for students with disabilities. 2464, programs for gifted and talented students. 3120.04, employment of substitutes. 3140, non-renewal, resignation, and termination. 3230, ethics and conflict of interest. 3281, personal property of staff members. 4230, ethics and conflict of interest. 5113, open enrollment program. 5200, attendance. 5330, administration of medication / emergency care. 5340, student accidents, illness, concussion, and sudden cardiac arrest.
Yeah, this is not a question, just it's spelled wrong, and I might want to get addressed.
Okay, thank you. 5341, emergency medical authorization. 5460, graduation requirements. 5511, dress and appearance.
I've got just a comment on that one. Not really I don't have a problem with the board's sort of very broad policy, which this is, but I know from there it filters down to the schools, and then schools have more specific policies. And this is one that I've heard some feedback on in the last few years, primarily at the middle school level. I've heard from both parents and employees that it's just not enforced. I don't know that is necessarily something that has to have board involvement in, but I think it would be a good idea for administration to take a look at the two middle school buildings, make sure that we have some consistent, clear, in the handbook guides, and then that those are actually enforced. I think there's a lot of room to debate what the exact guidelines should be, but I don't think there's much room to debate over whether or not they should be enforced. So whatever they are, they should be enforced as they're written, and it would be good to have that be nice and clear in the handbook.
I was going to say the exact same thing. This is probably one of the biggest areas of feedback that I've been getting, quite honestly, from parents and from staff. They're like, somebody has to start enforcing this stuff because, in their opinion, they've never seen it this extreme. And it just seems like it, somebody or they're just pushing the edge more and more, and nothing's ever done. So it would be great to have some consistency there.
I've heard that at the high school level as well.
And as an administrator, I'm going to just state it this way, it needs to be enforced. These are the types of things that administrators have to do in the schools, and that follow-through has to take place. And it's not a fun thing to do. I understand that. I've been there. I've done that. But the bottom line is, if that's a policy, then we need to follow it, and the building administrators need to take care of that.
One question. The switch from parent/guardian to just parent, I'm assuming we have students in the district that are not living with their parents. I'd be curious as to why we are making that more reductive instead of inclusive.
I looked at that, I can answer that question. I think it was because the way that it was written didn't address 18-year-olds, because it was just the parents or guardians, not the student as well. So I think the way it got rewritten includes the students as well into it.
It just literally says the student's parent.
I gotta find my notes here. I don't have it. Thought I did. Yeah, it says the technical correction reflects updated terminology, is what it says in the notes.
Yeah, it's a good question though, why Neola is changing that. Unless it's defined elsewhere, and they just don't want to keep repeating it.
I guess it's possible. It would make more sense than if we just said guardian and that was defined as parent or other responsible adult, because parent is a pretty legal term.
We could ask our Neola rep and bring that answer back at the next meeting.
I just don't want to be dismissive of any parental or family situation that doesn't reflect that.
Good point, Sarah. Good point. Can we follow up on that specifically?
We can for sure. I remember talking with Tim a little bit about that. I don't remember the specific. We'll get an answer for you and get back to you on it. Other comments for dress and appearance? Great. Moving on. 5512, the use of tobacco and nicotine by students.
Yeah, just two questions. So I saw in here that it was the response to policy violations was struck. It did, and I probably missed it somewhere else, but is there other verbiage in terms of what the repercussions are for the violation? Or for a violation?
From a disciplinary standpoint.
Right. It says response to policy violations, and all of that is struck. There's two paragraphs, page 1 and 2. And I didn't see anything that replaced it. Maybe there doesn't need to be, and it just implies that we have, latitude to use normal discipline channels, and if that's the case, that's fine.
That each building would respond to the discipline infraction with their disciplinary flow chart of what they would do. Is that?
Yeah, is that the question?
Correct, yep.
Okay, so that's the solution.
Correct.
Okay, and then my other question is, when are we gonna get serious about enforcing this? Because, and I know we talked about these vape detectors. Every's an absolute. 99% of high school kids that I talk to say that anytime they go into a restroom, they can smell pot or they smell vapes. Every single time. And there was just an article on, I can't remember what district it was in the southeast. They
just came out.
Yeah,
this past week.
they deployed 75 vape detectors in bathrooms, and between the use of those detectors and cameras outside of the bathrooms, because that's what I guess we've heard over the years is, well, it's impossible to enforce. We don't know who's doing it. we've got to do something, because right now the prisoners have the keys, and it's just continuing. It seems like it's continuing to grow, especially getting feedback. You know, it started with the parents, but now when the students themselves, at least, are raising this. I mean, typically they were the ones like, oh yeah, you know, so-and-so smoking dope, but now they're complaining about it.
I wonder if this is something I had talked with maybe Wendy, getting together with our secondary principals and starting, there's a few things there, the dress code, talking about this as well, and having them come up with some group work to decide what is our response going to be, how we're going to do that. I know that it's a mixed bag when it comes to the vape detectors, and speaking with some of the principals, they would prefer to have a staff member who does nothing but monitor and walk through to check those things out, because we've gotten some mixed reviews from other Valley Conference schools about how cost prohibitive it is to have those vape detectors in there without seeing a real gain from having them in there.
Well, and I don't want to get into all the details now, but there has to be some kind of sentinel effect from having them there. There has to be some deterrence.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that a kid knows they're sitting in the stall smoking pot or a vape, and if it's going to go up, it's going off, and I'm in there. That they don't care about that. I have a hard time believing that. And maybe that's another discussion we can have here broader.
I think it's a good idea to get the group together and talk about it, maybe bring something back to the board.
Okay.
I think it's a cost that the community would be receptive to supporting as well. When we talk about future referendum requests, a camera outside of the bathrooms and vape detectors.
Well, my question is, do we not have cameras outside the bathrooms? We have cross-site with cameras in the hallways. I'm sure that picks up the bathrooms as well. And having put those in before, that's exactly how we did catch students from doing that. Plus the fact, and I'd like to hear from our administration as well, the cost effectiveness of hall monitors. Paid hall monitors that walk the facilities and making sure that they step into these places. And that's something that is used in a lot of high schools as well, but it's another cost that we'd have to be talking about. So
I've had
the
parents,
cost factor would have to be.
I've had parents volunteer to do that. I think some of it may have been tongue in cheek, but they're like, yeah, I'll volunteer. I will come walk the halls because what's going on is out of control. But you could have a sign-up sheet.
And what's nice about that is they're also checking doors that have been propped open, doors that have been used for leaving when students are not supposed to be leaving, checking everything and moving throughout the building. Something that I think the administration should be thinking about, looking at.
5540, the school and governmental agencies. 5610, suspension and expulsion. 5610.02, in-school discipline. 5611, due process rights. 5710, student complaints. 6230, budget hearing. 6320, budget hearing. 6620, petty cash. 7410, maintenance. 7430, safety standards. 7440, facility security. 7440.02, smart monitoring equipment. 7540.03, student technology acceptable use and safety. 7540.04, staff technology acceptable use and safety. 7540.05, assistive technology and services. 7540.07, district issued student email account. 8125, consultants. 8310, public records. 8395, student mental health services. 8531, free and reduced price meals. 8700, lactating employees.
One question on that. It says here that the time allotted for that is unpaid.
Yeah.
Is that a law?
Yeah, that's federal law.
That we can't pay women if they're...
Not that we can't. Probably just make sure I speak.
Thank you.
It's not that we can't pay them, but
they can use any of their breaks or lunch time without issue. But if they're taking time away where we need to have substitutes cover, that's essentially what you're talking about. So most of the staff, we work with them to adjust their schedule, for example, so that their prep times align to when they may need to go to the lactation room, and then they would do their prep or whatever else during that time frame. So typically it's not an issue, but this language is simply an update to make sure that it aligns to what the federal law states. It was recommended by the attorneys at Neola. It wasn't a change that we put in.
It just seems punitive. You know, like, if somebody has to make up time for this, I don't know, I would support paying.
Can we repeat that back to you, Kevin? So as long as a sub is not necessary to cover their room, they are technically being paid?
Correct, yes. It's a case, most often, it doesn't actually impact probably our teaching staff quite as often. It probably impacts more like a custodian or a paraeducator when they're an hourly staff member. And there again, we work with them in terms of where their breaks are, where their lunch is. We'll put those together. We've modified schedules quite a bit to accommodate folks. But if their needs for lactation time exceed what those times actually allow, that's where the federal government in the law says it needs to be unpaid in those circumstances. But it's pretty rare that we have staff that get into that space. I think I've seen it maybe once since this law ever even went into place at a prior employer. So.
Okay, as long as we're not, like I said, pardon?
I agree with you.
Yeah, it just read as punitive, you know, that
Yeah.
somebody has to take their break instead of, and it just seemed like a trivial thing that we could just say, go do what you have to do.
Yeah, and our adjustment of schedules is our way to kind of work with employees to get around that piece and be able to give them the time they need for that purpose, but also balance that with the work that we need to have done throughout the day. So, but yeah, the policy is really a direct reflection of the federal law, the way that it's designed and written.
Thank you.
You bet.
And our last policy is 6230. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got a question. Nick, do you have a question? Did you have a question or something?
No, I would actually kind of say the opposite. I think that's important that people understand that people are doing it on their break, or that it's not unpaid, because then you kind of do open yourself up to, hey, that's not equal. You know, looking at equality, that's not equal to other people who may not be in the same sense. Well, if they can do this while being paid, well, then why can't I do something else that medically I need to do, or something like that? So.
I was going to ask a question. We moved very quickly over the facility security, which we've talked about in the past, the technology security. For the future, I'd like to hear about what type of security we have for our technology coming into our buildings, considering how much technology we have with the number of devices that we have. I'm kind of looking at you, Rob, as a presentation for us to know that we are protecting our students with the technology, protecting them from negative things that may happen with technology, and not just simply from the physical point of view of having our buildings safe and secure. We need to be safe and secure in our technology in all of our buildings as well. So if we can have a presentation sometime on that and what we are doing in order to establish that security.
Okay, our last policy is 6235, fund balance. That concludes our policies.
Now, it should be noted that board members have the opportunity, as we've been discussing, to go through all these policies digitally, and we are previewing those before we come in. It sounds sometimes like we're going so quickly through this, but we have had the time beforehand in order to take a look at that. That's for the people at home when they're listening to us. So with that, with the Neola policies in review, I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the recommended changes to the attached policies.
Second.
All in favor?
Are you excluding the couple we discussed?
Good question, before we moved on to that.
I would guess the question is it substantive enough that you don't want to accept those policies, or do you want to pull them
You
out
wanna
at
pull those out?
the board meeting?
I'm asking that of the people who raised the questions, yeah.
Usually those were done as administrative updates. I don't think they had to come back.
Okay.
If everybody else is good with it.
Those are directives to make sure that we move forward. And then you have your administrative guidelines that go off of the policies as well.
Yeah, I'm good with it being moved to the regular board, but it would be nice at that meeting to find out what Neela's answer was to the guardian question. And we can always pull it out then if we don't like the answer.
And that can be approved at that board meeting.
Yep.
This is just moving it from this meeting to the next one to be approved. Okay. All right, agenda item 11.
We didn't vote yet.
We had a call question.
You paused me, so I'm moving right along. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Agenda item 11. Ms. Gundrum and Mr. Vagut will present a budget reconciliation plan for budgeting purposes only. Should have just pulled up a seat and had you just sit right there instead of taking that time. Go ahead.
Before we get started, I'd just like to note that we are very early in the budget process, so most of the things that you'll be presented with tonight probably will change. Also, that we are asking for approval on budget development process only. We are not asking for approval on specific items such as salary tonight. So we'll walk through quickly our budget situation. We've covered it quite a bit. Kind of our process and lens through which we are evaluating everything. We'll actually walk through the budget reconciliation, then give an idea of a 3-year fiscal plan, and then go through some next steps. And questions you have at any point, please ask them of us. So we are funded in large part by per pupil allocation, and our allocation last year was $11,774. We are projecting that $325 increase that has now been ruled on in the state Supreme Court. So we're projecting that $12,099 number for next year. I would say that that is fantastic, and that is less than the rate of inflation for be the third year in a row of that. And then just a reminder on the budget timeline. Oh, one other thing that has not been decided on yet in the state budget is the special education reimbursement. So it's currently hovering around 31%. It's possible that that will be increased for next year.
What have you been hearing from your colleagues around the state? We hear different things from when we talk about with the legislators and things of that fashion. What are you hearing from your colleagues?
Great question. So of course everyone is now definitely dialing in the 325. Almost no one is counting on anything more than that per pupil. And then I don't think a lot of people are budgeting in a significant change for special education reimbursement.
Okay.
So that's what I'm hearing.
All right. Thank you.
Is that jive with what you're?
Yeah.
Just a little referendum recap. Record number of referendum this year, both I think in terms of number of referendum and overall dollars on the ballot. Fall pass rate was pretty high, 75% plus. Spring pass rate was a little lower. Next opportunities for a district to go to referendum would be spring of 2026 or fall of 2026. And as a reminder, a district can only ask 2 referendum questions annually. Budget calendar is exactly what we looked at last time. Final budget will not be adopted until October. So right now we're presenting it with the reconciliation plan. And the next thing we will do will be an initial budget. Again, a number of things will change throughout the process. One thing I did want to highlight, I know this is very small print. We had been projecting a 5% health insurance premium increase. We are looking at a 7% health insurance premium increase. So that takes the overall deficit from somewhere around 3.7 million to closer to just over 4 million for next year that we're working with. Subsequent years have still been budgeted, I believe, at 4%. Is that correct, Noel? Yes. Okay. So when we look through everything, there are a lot of different things you could do to balance a budget, and we've worked with our departments and our building administrators to come up with a laundry list of things that could be done. And as we look through all those options, we want to evaluate them against some sort of criteria. So are they high student impact? Will they directly impact the experience of our students? Are they low student impact versus, is it a high budget impact? Is it a low budget impact? Mr. Boucher mentioned athletics and fine arts and activities often come up under budget cuts, but they are a relatively very small percentage of our budget. So that would be something that would be high student impact, low budget impact. Is it good fiscal decision making or is it difficult fiscal decision making? Is it something we should be looking at even if we didn't have a budget deficit? And is the budget impact immediate or is it something that will necessitate a little longer term change for the district? So some immediate changes, and I apologize, there's a mistake on here. For immediate changes for the budget. Continue to defer needed maintenance. This year alone, we're deferring over $4 million in needed building maintenance, and that will just get kicked down the road. Salary changes, this says 1% increases instead of 3%. That number's been updated to 1.5%. I apologize. You will see that corrected later in the slideshow. As a reminder, CPI for salary negotiations was set at 2.95%. And each additional percent, one way or another, increase or decrease, is an $800,000 impact on our budget. We are proposing that we reduce department budgets by 3% next year. That will be directly felt by our staff and students. And then we just had our middle school athletics fund to fund 80. So again, that's not an overall budget increase necessarily for middle school athletics, but it is moving it to a different fund. So that would provide some Fund 10 relief. At this point, I will turn it over to Tabitha.
Thank you. The next couple slides just walk through in more broad application as to where positions were impacted by the reconciliation process. And so the first bullet is really our largest impact area, and that was the reorganization that we approved earlier with elementary. So when all was said and done and we filtered through all of the closing schools and the moving of the students and the staff, we were able to reduce 10 teacher positions, 4 clerical positions, and 1 administrator reduction. And so we were able to fill all the needs by just moving staff around. For example, teacher reductions, if we moved a 3-section school and a 2-section school together, when we spread those students across, we may not have needed 5 sections, we maybe needed 4. So that was applied using our class size guidelines that are already in place and implemented uniformly across the district. The second area, which Josh mentioned in the prior slide, would be the reduction from what we had originally put into our initial budget forecast of 3%, moving that budgetary allotment to a 1.5%, and that results in $1.2 million of savings for that item as well. The $300,000 he mentioned as the middle school athletics switching over to leverage the Fund 80 area. This next page is a compilation of a number of different things, and I'll start with the additional staffing realignments. So in this second slide, there's an additional 4.6 teacher positions, and those are FTEs, full-time equivalents. There are an additional 7 FTEs in para reductions and a 1.0 reduction in administrators. The administrative reduction you acted on with the consent agenda addendum that was added to the agenda earlier this afternoon. Along with a couple of teacher retirements, there was a reduction of an administrator who is going to be retiring from this building. So that is where the 1.0 reduction is coming for administrators. The teacher reductions have to do with a couple of areas, as the paras also. Our title funding has been, what we've been supporting for staffing has been exceeding what our Title I revenues were from the federal government. And we made the decision that we would pull that back and ensure that we are spending the title allocation only. So part of that ended up being that we're in the process of reassigning para-educators, because we're going to use those Title I funds to fund our teacher positions specifically. Additionally, there's some teacher reductions with regard to making sure that our charter schools are staffed similarly to what we staff all of our other buildings. That's what their contracts say. So there's some tweaks there. And there's one pilot program teacher that also has been reassigned to an open classroom position. AmeriCorps elimination, AmeriCorps lost the person who oversaw that program for Wausau School District this past summer. They made the decision not to fill that, and so we do not have any AmeriCorps workers planned, and we had about $80,000 in the budget planned for those staff members. So we won't have those because the program's just not available to us this coming year. And then the 3% all budget reduction is listed up there. So when you add all of these reductions together, it is just shy of $4 million. I think it's important to note that there will be some impact in terms of the educational program and some of the supports that we have. But the reductions that we have listed in this slide, these 3 slides, ultimately are a reflection of what I would say are the least of a number of bad choices. I think that's how we referred to them when we were talking. None of the reductions to get to this $4 million were things we embraced ultimately. This last slide just gives the FTE totals for all of this, almost $4 million. And in the parentheses, the percent that's notated there is the percent of the employee group reduction. So for example, 14.6 FTE of teachers is 2% of our overall teacher group, just so that you understand how those percentages were put together, because we thought it might be important for people to see both of those comparisons, both numbers as well as the percentage of the group.
We've touched on a number of these things already, but there will be, of course, impacts on staff and students. Continued deferred maintenance, the HVAC and AC at 2 of our elementary schools specifically. Those buildings get hot and they will be full in coming years. Roofing needs, again, at our elementary schools specifically. There is some potential to be less than ideally competitive on staffing salaries going forward. And there will be, as we mentioned, an increase in staff health insurance costs going forward.
Hey, Josh?
Yes.
Can you go back to the impact?
Yep.
So this is where I want to continue to push administration. It's great to speak in the generalities now, but we've got to start putting meaningful changes or impacts on paper. For example, decreased student support through staffing reductions. What does that mean? What support is going to go away? Potential loss of staff due to failure to remain competitive. What's the current average tenure? Where, how hypothetically is this going to impact tenure? What is it going to do to turnover? Decreasing department and building budgets could mean less opportunities for students. Is that less field trips? Is that fewer hands-on projects? Is that fewer concert performances? Whatever it is, we have to start turning this stuff into reality. So next time people are at the ballot box, they can say clearly, okay, if we don't do this, this is what's going to happen. Except next spring it's going to be even more so. So I don't know how else to get that point across, but I think we've got to get away from this broad brush and just say specifically, here's what's going to happen.
This is due to the referendum failing, correct?
Yes.
This $4 million reduction?
Yes.
Okay.
And I appreciate that question a great deal. One of the pieces that I guess we could have connected a little tighter, but the 7 paraeducators that are being reduced in our Title I reading support program will definitely have an impact on our support for our student learners. Again, it's money that we were spending out of our Fund 10 budget above and beyond the grant information that we received for Title I. But those combinations of staff members will no longer be available to support students. We have other supports in place, but those supports have been used in other ways. So it is going to require us to either reduce the amount of support that we can provide or at least distribute that differently, just as an example.
And that's one of the things that we have talked about previously is that as a district, we've absorbed without marketing what we've absorbed. We haven't said explicitly, this is why your students' experience is less. So if you're reducing title, it means kids are getting less reading support next year because of this situation. So we really need to get to a bulleted item and even build into for what it's going to look like next year.
Right.
I want to address.
I think Pat brings up a very good point in the fact that if we don't become more specific on all of these things, people will not know what has been cut, and they're going to keep on asking that. But that specificity that comes forward is going to help all of us understanding that and the community to understand it as well. So, yeah, I agree. The generalities and the percentages and dealing with that, getting down in the nuts and bolts and letting people know specifically, we're cutting back. It's going to affect students.
Nick, you asked a good question, and I know we kind of all went like this at you because it's a complicated answer. We knew coming into the fall next school year that we were going to have a between $3 and $4 million gap just because of increasing expenses across the board, even if we did not do anything new. So the answer to, is this because of the referendum? It is, in that had the referendum passed, we would have filled that hole and had enough to do the maintenance to some extent. But no, because it's not like we lost $4 million because of the referendum. It just means we can't actually fill in the gap we knew was coming. So now we have to, instead of filling the gap with the referendum, figure out how to cut $4 million.
One question is deferred maintenance. Who's deciding what is allowed to be deferred versus not? Because if you look at code for either CFM requirements or temperatures that are allowed in public spaces, for especially schools and things like that. Now, I don't know what specific codes for students. I mean, Wisconsin's different from southern schools, but they have to have AC and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So I will say that it's a process like everything else. And this year specifically, we did something that I thought was really good. We had CISA 10 come in and evaluate our elementary buildings. They're now doing the same thing for our secondary buildings. And they gave us a list of what are your immediate needs, what's your 3 to 5 year window, what do you need to do in the next 10 years. So our buildings and grounds director, Mr. Amansky, worked with what had been done previously along with their findings to come up with a list of both what would be done this year and what would be deferred going forward.
Yeah, and people always need to understand that when you defer maintenance, you're not just pushing a $5,000 repair off, but if something's not being maintained, that $5,000 repair can turn into a $20,000 and a $30,000. So either going into the hole slightly to pay for some maintenance it could actually be beneficial rather than deferring some of it sometimes.
Nick, I think it's tremendous that you're asking these questions at this point in time because of the fact that, people around the table may be smiling saying we've gone over that. But you're bringing it again to the forefront, being new to the board. You're pointing out, wait a minute, you mean this is happening, we're not doing this? It brings that topic to the forefront so that everyone can hear us as well. Anybody watching the recording will now say, oh, you're bringing that forward. Yes, it's very important. And so it's not something that smiling like we've done that. No, it's an important question that you need to continue as a new board member to ask being on the board.
Yeah, and it's a big thing that, talking about referendums, it needs to start being pushed now. Not a couple months ahead of time, and then you review hey, this is what the card and that quick commercial was to get to people, because I know very few people who even knew what it was when they actually voted, and people were blown away by that. And it's almost like it's something that has to be just, pushed into the community, like this is why, over and over and over, so that they know, when everyone knows when they go to the ballot box, of why. It's a huge thing. So.
Just one more specific to add to Pat's list, because I agree with him that we need to be a lot more clear on our story. As we get ready to start doing this next budget, that third bullet point on there is something we're really going to have to talk about, which is the potential loss of staff because of a failure to remain competitive. And we talked about this a little bit at the budget workshop, that 1% versus 1.5% versus 2%, because it's finding that balancing point. But if we're going to lose our best teachers because they're going to go to the districts around us who are doing 2% or 2.5% raises, that's a conversation we really need to have. So I think the more specific information we can get about what the districts around us are doing for compensation, that would be helpful for us.
Good follow-up, Sarah. Thank you.
And a number have agreed already, and a number have not, so, yeah. I went through that. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. We're just asking you to move this forward for budget development purposes only.
Let me put the motion out there. If there are any questions, then we can follow up with the follow-up questions. I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the budget reconciliation plan as presented for budget development purposes only.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any follow-up questions that you have? Nope. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for that. I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
So second.
Now you come in. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.